Today's video is proudly sponsored by Linode. Linode has been doing cloud computing since 2003, which is actually before Amazon Web Services was even a thing. On Linode's platform, you can get your server up and running in minutes, and they include all the popular distributions such as Debian, Fedora, Ubuntu, and get this, even Arch Linux. And let's be honest, what could be better than a Linux-focused cloud server provider that lets you tell all of your friends, I run Arch? Linode has multiple server plans available to make any app scalable and flexible. You could use it to host a blog, a VPN server, a Minecraft server, and much more. In fact, Linode is the platform of choice to host the entire web presence of LearnLinuxTV. In addition, Linode offers 24/7 365 support, regardless of plan size, so you can get help from a live person when you need it. New users can get started right now with $100 towards your new account, and I highly recommend you check them out because Linode is awesome. And now, let's get started with today's video. Hello again everyone, and welcome back to LearnLinuxTV. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you guys about the concept of a game server. And I have mine right here in front of me right now. And this build was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working on this project, and I figured I would share it with you guys to see if any of you would like to set up something similar to this. Now, the whole reason why I did this was to find a new way to run Windows games on Linux PCs. The thing is, it's very common on my channel and pretty much every single Linux community out there to see people asking, how do I get my Windows games to work on my Linux computer? The fact is, there really shouldn't be any expectation at all for a Windows game to run on a Linux computer. Because honestly, Windows games were designed to run on Windows, so we shouldn't be trying to force them to run on something that they weren't supposed to run on. But I get it. You guys don't care about politics. You just want to play your games and run your favorite operating system. So what I've come up with is a potential compromise that might work for you. So what I'm going to do in this video is talk to you about what this build actually is, what the concept is, who it's right for, why you might want to consider building one for yourself, and by the end of the video, you'll decide for yourself whether or not this is a viable solution to play your Windows games on your Linux PC. So what I'm going to do right now is throw this server in my rack, get it connected, and then I'll be right back and we'll get right into it. All right, so the game server is racked and now it's time to talk about it. And what I love most about this idea is that it allows me to run games on computers that wouldn't otherwise be able to handle higher end games. But the key takeaway here is that if you have a Linux machine and you want to run your Windows games, then set up a Windows game server, which is what we're talking about. But I want to address the elephant in the room first before we continue. And that elephant is the fact that this server is using Steam streaming. Now I know you guys are probably, disappointed to hear that. Maybe you think that's not really all that cool, but just hear me out. Steam streaming is actually potentially a game changer, but the problem is there's some quirks that makes it not perfect. There's some adjustments that you have to make. And depending on if you know which adjustments in particular that you need to make, that really differentiates whether or not it's going to work well for you. And another thing too is if you have, a really shoddy LAN setup, then you're going to run into stuttering and some things and it's not going to be pleasant. But if you have it set up correctly, it could actually be a game changer. Now, the thing is, Steam streaming is not specific to a game server build at all. If you have an actual gaming PC, then you can literally right now use Steam streaming to a Linux laptop or something like that. There's nothing stopping you. So you don't actually need to build a game server, but this is YouTube and I like to take things to the next level, which is exactly what I'm doing. So the concept around a game server is to have some sort of server in your house. It could just be your gaming PC tower. Maybe you just leave it well enough alone and you make it headless, or you have a headless server and a server chassis, and inside the chassis you essentially have desktop parts. So since it's headless, there's no display. You just plug in a network cable and a power cable, and you're good to go. At that point, any computer in your house can stream games from that server, even computers that are running an incompatible operating system, or even those computers that you might have that have integrated graphics that can't run something like Doom Eternal or whatever it is you are trying to run. The best part about this is that Windows is installed on the game server, so the games are technically running on their platform, the platform they were designed to run on. So there's no hacks like Wine or anything like that in the middle to force something to work in an environment where it's not supposed to. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about my particular build, what decisions I've made for the parts and things like that, and then you'll be able to find out if this is something that you might want to build. But one thing I want to mention first and foremost is that you don't actually have to build anything, and the whole idea here is to spend as little as possible, because I know most of you guys, you don't have money to buy or build a brand new rig, and I get it. So the lowest cost of entry here, the least amount of money that you'll be able to spend with this idea, is somewhere around $15 US. No, not 1,500, literally $15 US. There's one part that isn't really required, but I consider it essential, that I'll get into later, that I do recommend you buy, and it runs for around $15 US or less. So the idea, like I said, is to spend as little money as possible, but if you have excess money or something like that and you want to build a brand new rig, you can do that, but you don't have to. Now, as good as Steam streaming actually is, there's one glaring deficiency that almost prevents this idea from working, a challenge that we have to overcome. And the challenge there is to make it headless. Servers generally don't have a display attached, but games need a display attached in order to run. You can't run a game without a display. Now it's possible there are maybe some games out there that'll just make some assumptions about resolution in the absence of a display. My experience though is that you do need to have a display attached. But that doesn't really work well for us for this purpose. That essentially means that you could have a gaming PC on your desk and you're streaming a game to your laptop, and the desktop on that display is showing the game at the same time your laptop is showing the game. That means that, that entire computer is dedicated to that game. So the only benefit you really get from that is being able to play the game on your couch or something like that, but your gaming PC is still showing everything on the monitor just like it would if you were sitting in front of it. And again, that's our biggest challenge here because we want it to be headless. So what do you do about that? Well, the answer, funny enough, is you buy a dummy monitor, a fake monitor. They actually exist. They look like flash drives or dongles, and you essentially plug one into the HDMI port of your video card, and it lies. It's a liar. It's just telling fibs. It's telling your computer, I'm a display. I'm actually a monitor. Honest, really, yeah. And your computer's like, okay, I have a display attached. And that's what allows you to make your computer headless or your server headless without a display, because it thinks that there's a display attached, which is what helps make this idea work. And then at that point, you make a decision. Do you want to build a brand new rig? Or maybe you just want to grab your desktop tower, throw it in the corner, run a network line to it, and call it a day. If you just reuse your existing gaming PC and make it headless, put it in a rack, maybe in a closet, then you only really need to buy that $15 dummy plug and you're done. Now there's some other tweaks that I'll get into that are, quality of life tweaks like automatic login that we do need to discuss. But at that point, you essentially have a game server and you've only spent around $15 US. Now you could actually buy a server chassis if you wanted to, and you could transport your desktop PC, your gaming PC parts into that chassis and then rack mount it. And that's especially popular for Homelabbers. There's a lot of people in my audience that have a Homelab, they have servers in their house, a server rack. And if that's you, you're probably loving this idea. I can have a game server racked in my server rack. I could put my gaming PC parts in there. That would be fun. And the thing is, yes, you can do that if you wanted to, but I'm leaving that up to you. I'm not suggesting that you build a brand new rig unless you want to do so. You could just, again, use the same computer that you have currently, make it headless, and you're done. Now, on my end, I didn't actually have a desktop tower lying around that I could take parts from. I would have liked to save money as well and not have to build something new, but I didn't actually have anything at all to use, so I decided to build a brand new rig. So what I'm going to do right now is tell you guys what all parts I decided to go along with, what the build process was like, and things like that. But just keep in mind that we're in a pandemic right now, so video cards are really hard to find. So the video card that I went along with is not the best that you can get. I mean, honestly, right now you kind of take what you can get when it comes to video cards because they're hard to come by. And the other parts that I went along with are more on the mid-tier, I would say. They're decent, but they're not the best. I'm not going to tell you that this is the best gaming server build, the most powerful build, or anything like that. It's not, but it's decent and it gets the job done. So let's take a look at the build. First, let's talk about the case. I decided to go with the D400 server chassis from iStar USA. Now, a quick disclaimer on that though. You have to be very careful when it comes to which chassis you purchase if you do purchase one from iStar USA. Reason being, quite a few of their server chassis don't actually work with ATX power supplies, and I haven't been able to figure out what kind of power supply they use. It seems like it's proprietary to me. I've tried all kinds of power supplies in my other server chassis, and I always ended up having to buy their proprietary power supply in order to make this work. Thankfully, the D400 in particular does indeed support ATX power supplies, so it was a win for me because the power supply that I had, the one that I purchased, it fit no problem, and I was good to go on that. But just keep in mind, if you do purchase a server chassis for any reason from iStar USA, just make sure that you understand what power supply you need to get first and foremost before you purchase it, and better yet, just get one with the power supply already included if you can. Another reason that I decided to go along with a 4U case like this one is because I actually tried to fit these parts in a 3U case, and they actually did fit, kind of. They didn't fit good enough to where I can get the top cover back on. So honestly, if you are going to be building a server like this with a video card and all these things, you should definitely go with a 4U chassis. Sure, you might be able to get all your parts to fit in a 3U chassis, but it's going to be a little constrained. I don't recommend that. Just go with the 4U chassis. It's easier. For the motherboard, I decided to go with the B550M from Gigabyte. And there's a very specific reason for that, and I'll get to that reason shortly. For the CPU, I decided to purchase the AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. Is it the best you can get? No. But it was good enough for what I wanted to achieve here, so it was cheaper than the more higher-end processors from AMD. I think it's more than good enough. And to finish the build, I went with the fastest RAM and NVMe storage that I could find. So I mentioned that there was a very specific reason why I decided to go with this motherboard. And the reason why was because it was one of the cheaper motherboards that were available at Micro Center when I went there that had 2 PCI Express slots. And that was very important to me. And no, I'm not trying to run dual GPUs or anything like that. But what I'm trying to do instead is have faster bandwidth. Because bandwidth is what can kill this idea. If you have a shoddy network, you're going to get shoddy experience because the games will run as fast as they're able to stream. So I decided to go with 10 gig Ethernet. And yeah, of course, my laptop doesn't have 10 gig Ethernet, but my desktop does. And that means I can stream games over 10 gig, and that's what really makes this idea work very well for me. Now, no, you don't have to go crazy and implement 10 gig. There's a significant cost in implementing that, but I already had 10 gig installed here in the office, thanks to Tom Lawrence. I'll put a card for that video that I did with him right about here. And since I had 10 gig, I figured I may as well use it for game streaming. For the video card, I went with the NVIDIA GeForce 1660 Ti, which is fairly decent. It's certainly not the best video card that you can buy right now, but in my case, it was the only one that I can buy, because as luck would have it, one computer store actually had GPUs in stock, and this was literally the only one that they had, so that's why I went with this particular GPU. Now my Thelio actually has a very fast GPU inside, a GPU that's actually better than the one that's in my game server. The thing is though, my Thelio is running Linux, specifically Pop! OS, so it runs the Linux games very well, but you know, Windows games, they might work, they might not work, there's hacks, there's workarounds. I didn't really want to deal with any of that, So I also decided to stream games to my Thelio as well. And since it has 10 gig, that's great. So my Windows games are streamed to my Thelio over 10 gig Ethernet, which makes the performance that much better. It's just awesome. So that takes care of the hardware side of things. Now let's talk about the software and the various tweaks. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a Windows game streaming server, so the first thing I did was install Windows 10. After that was done, I noticed that there was a lot of bloat. I mean, I knew that would happen. This is not the first time I've used Windows 10 or anything like that. But every time I install Windows 10, I'm just taken aback by all the bloat and things I didn't ask for. So I just wanted to know, is there anything that I can do to make my Windows 10 install leaner? So I decided to phone a friend and ask for help. So Chris, what do you have for me?
Not only do I have something for you, but I have something that is a GitHub project that a lot of people from the community have contributed to. Let me show you this. It's pretty darn cool as it's evolved over the last couple years to become something that I use on every Windows install. We have the actual GitHub project right here, and over on my website, we also have just a little download string. You just copy it to the clipboard, you open up your Windows terminal or PowerShell, and you just right-click to paste in, and it'll go ahead and launch this utility. The utility, right here. If you don't have WinGit, it'll go ahead and install that for you. If you have anything that you need to go, I usually just go ahead and go through and say, okay, I'm going to be using Brave for this install, ImageGlass for the viewer, VLC for the video player, maybe some Codium if I'm doing any coding on the system, and then usually just Notepad++ and Sumatra PDF is what I usually pick out of this selection. And then I usually just hit Essential Tweaks. It goes ahead, flies through the entire thing, disables telemetry and all the tracking that Windows does, or at least a good chunk of it. And you can even go even further than this, but I always recommend people just start with Essential Tweaks. And if you don't like this, you can always do the Undo All option, or you could easily go in and restore from the Windows restore point if something doesn't get undone by the Undo All option. Lastly here, if there's anything about Windows I hate more than anything, is its updates. And I usually always just hit security updates. This does all the group policy behind it, so no feature updates will get pushed through to your system, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. And then it only downloads security updates, which it goes about 4 days out on. So you're not going to get bleeding edge security updates that break your system. It'll wait 4 days from Patch Tuesday when Windows releases them. So it'll always be the weekend. Much like we do in a business, that's how I use this tool. And I hope it's helpful for you and your audience.
Thank you, Chris. That was awesome. So now my Windows 10 install is leaner. I got rid of some of the crap, but there's still some other tweaks that I had to do to make this work. So the next thing that I wanted to do was set up automatic login. When the server starts up, I want it to automatically log in my user so I don't actually have to log in every single time. Now the problem is the process that I've always followed to set up automatic login doesn't work anymore in Windows 10. I mean, I literally set up automatic login a few months ago in Windows 10, so they just recently removed the option that used to be in the control panel for users. That's weird. But after a bit of Googling, I found an article that outlines the process of re-enabling that option, which requires a registry tweak, which I've made, and then a restart, which I did. And then after I logged in and I checked that control panel again, the option returned. So I set that up, and now that box is checked, or in this case, not checked. Next, I needed a way to access my machine remotely. That way, I don't have to connect a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse just to change settings. And that was easy. The simple method here is to enable Remote Desktop, which I did. After I enabled Remote Desktop, I was then able to use an app like Ramina to connect to my gaming server and manage it remotely. So that part was pretty easy. So that's actually what's completed my overall build. After I set up my software tweaks, everything was working, and I had my very own game streaming server in the rack in my closet that I can connect to over 10 gig or Wi-Fi if I absolutely need to run it from a laptop, and stream my Windows games to my Linux computers. Overall, I think this build actually worked out very well for me. And one of the best things about this is that it gives me access to play some of the games that I wouldn't have access to otherwise. For example, here's Dragon Quest XI.
Monsters! They're coming this way!
Whenever I do talk about games on my channel, I always make it a point to talk about Final Fantasy. That's one of my favorite series of all time. But I love Dragon Quest as well. And Dragon Quest XI runs very well for me over streaming. And I have to say, it was really hard to pry myself away from this game just to return to editing this video. In addition, I also decided to try out Portal 2 over streaming. Although, to be fair, Portal 2 does have a native Linux version, so you could argue that it's probably worthless to do this over streaming. But I was curious and I decided to give it a try.
Do you know what? It just goes to show people with brain damage are the real heroes in the end, aren't they, at the end of the day?
And Portal 2 actually worked beautifully over 10 gig Ethernet on my Thelio. You wouldn't even be able to tell that it's not running natively. Now you might see some flickering and some screen artifacts because of my screen recorder, but on my end, I actually didn't notice anything wrong at all. Another of my favorite games is Skyrim. And Skyrim is somewhat old by today's standards, but I don't know what it is about this game. It just never seems to get old. And here's actual footage of Skyrim running in 4K over Steam streaming to my Thelio. It just looks beautiful, and I was absolutely shocked over how well it runs. In fact, most of the games that I've tried work just fine. However, a few games did have some quirks though. One of those quirks in particular is with the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters that were recently released. For some reason, I don't have an option to stream these games at all. That leads me to make the assumption that some games just don't allow streaming. But that's just an assumption, and I'm basing that assumption on the fact that these games in particular don't have the streaming option available at all, so I was unable to play them via Steam Remote Play. That doesn't really bother me though, because these particular Final Fantasy titles work fine over Proton, so you don't really need streaming in order to play these games, and since these games are old school, you won't need a fancy GPU to run them either. So I don't consider this a loss. And there's some other inconsistencies here and there. Here again is Skyrim running in 4K, streaming over 10 gig Ethernet to my Thelio. And again, it looks great. But other games, they actually lock the resolution to 1080p for some reason. Portal 2 is an example of that. For some reason or another, I wasn't able to select a higher resolution in Portal 2. But when it comes to Skyrim, I set the quality settings all the way to Ultra, and the resolution to 4K, and it's fine. So my hardware is more than capable of streaming 4K content, but some games, I guess they just don't want me to do that. Another oddity is with Nier Automata.
Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment?
And this is one of my favorite games right here. Now, I have heard that the PC edition of Nier Automata has some issues. I actually played it originally on the PlayStation 4, but as you can see right here, it's suffering from some lag. The screen actually looks like it's pausing from time to time. And that's a shame because this game is fantastic. I highly recommend it actually. If any of you guys that are watching this video are able to stream Nier Automata, please let me know in the comments down below how that worked out for you. If you do run into some problems, then never fear because there's some settings that you can change that might actually improve your performance. If you go into the remote play options within Steam, there are several settings there that you can tweak that might make the experience all that much better. I can't really tell you what to set this to, just experiment with this on your end, and you'll find something that works best in your case. But a bigger issue that I ran into is that remote play with Steam, it won't let you choose a refresh rate over 60 Hz. And that's a shame for those of you out there that have an expensive monitor because if you're going to pay all that extra money for that awesome refresh rate, then I'm sure you want to utilize that refresh rate. Now there's an alternative to Steam Remote Play called Moonlight. Moonlight uses NVIDIA Game Stream, and I'm pretty sure you need an NVIDIA GPU to take advantage of it. It's really easy to set up. All you have to do is enable Game Stream through your NVIDIA settings, and that's it from the server side. On the client, there's an app called Moonlight that you can download, and Moonlight is available for virtually everything, including Linux. And once you download the client, you should be able to stream games through Moonlight. What I love most about Moonlight is that it allows you to take advantage of refresh rates over 60 Hz. So if your game supports Moonlight, then you're going to have a better experience in my opinion. If nothing else, if you have any problem streaming games through remote play, then Moonlight might actually work better for you. So I actually recommend that you enable this if you have an NVIDIA GPU, because it's always good to have an alternative at least. And again, if you have one of those expensive fancy monitors, you'll especially want to try out Moonlight. Now, a problem I experienced on my end is that for some reason, my screen recorder will not allow me to record footage over Moonlight. And that's the only reason why I'm not able to show you guys footage of gameplay via Moonlight in this video, but from what I can see, it works out pretty well. Now I know that this isn't actually a viable solution for everyone, but I do think it's something that people should consider at least. It might work for you, so just give it a thought. Maybe this could be a method that you can use to still be able to play your Windows games, but use Linux as your primary platform. So let me know what you thought of this build and this idea in the comments down below. I appreciate you checking out this video. If you like this video, please click that like button, and I'll see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.